Hey everybody, Matt Lawton here, and this is the Astrological Winds channel, and we've got a little bit of a different setup here for us today. I am going to look at the next quarter of the United States during the summer months here in the United States, and how I do that is by looking at the solstice chart, which is what you're seeing, set for Washington, D.C. And I've been using this method for many years to look at what the next 3 months of the U.S.'s general forecast is going to be like for the country. And this has been a very effective method in mundane astrology. If you go back on the Astrological Winds channel to past episodes, you'll find one back in March, mid-March, that was for the spring equinox and how the next 3 months in the U.S. would be based on that. And if you go back to that and listen to that, I'm not going to review it, you'll see it was very spot on. And so when you do a chart like this, you can really already get a good idea of the way a lot of the trends are going to go in a country, and in this case the US, just based on what's going on in our current events. So the way to do a chart like this is to just go around the 12 houses, each house in mundane astrology, which is the study of the politics and world events and countries and their leaders and how populations react to all that stuff. Each of the 12 houses will represent, just like in your personal chart, a large section of society and how we react to that collectively. So really the easiest way to look at this chart and interpret it is to just look at the different houses and see what sign is on the cusp and the planet that rules that, the condition of that planet, and then planets that are actually in that house will also affect that area of the country. So looking at this chart, you'll notice here right away is our rising sign, the ascendant, and you'll see that Scorpio. So that's pretty telling right away. I'm sure if you know some astrology, Scorpio is a very intense sign. It brings up very intense emotional feelings because stuff is being dragged out into the light that has been swept under the rug by the nation and by the people of the nation for a long time. So issues are coming up that are deeply emotionally charged issues for the nation as a collective. The first house and the ascendant in this chart represents how the nation is in general. What's the state of mind or the state of being of the United States as a collective right now, and the people that make up that collective. So very intense feelings right now, very intense emotions are going to be brought up over this next quarter. Now, this makes the Lord or the ruler of the chart Mars. Mars rules Scorpio. Mars in this chart, as you can see, is conjunct Neptune in Pisces, which is Neptune's sign, in the 4th house. Now, what's really interesting about this house, about this chart, is there's 3 houses that are really like working together very strongly in the chart. And that is the 1st house, the Scorpio with the fourth house, which is Mars, the ruler, and Pisces is on the cusp of the fourth house, which is co-ruled by Jupiter in the second house, which is conjunct Pluto, and by Neptune, which is conjunct Mars. And what you'll see here is the Mars-Neptune conjunction is trining the ascendant, and the Mars-Neptune conjunction is sextiling the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, and the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction is sextiling the ascendant. So this, and this, as you can see, are very tightly bound together in this chart. And what I think this is really going to mean. Now, first of all, the Mars-Neptune conjunction. This is in the fourth house. Now, remember, the state of the consciousness of the people. Now, the fourth house represents the land, the nation, the nation's heritage, and once again, literally the people living in the country. So what we have here, this Mars-Neptune, is very confusing energy, okay? Mars is the activating planet, and it wants to move forward. So it's very active energy. But Neptune is the dissipator of energy. So this is very, very confusing, lost, diluted energy that the nation is feeling. And interestingly enough, this is where you really get to see how astrology is so real and manifests so much in the world. Mars and Neptune, when they get together, rule infectious diseases. So I would not kid you about how intense this fits right in. People feeling lost in their homeland because of an infectious disease and not knowing how to deal with it. Does this describe the situation that we already know we're in? And obviously that means the coronavirus is going to be the main player in the next quarter of the U.S.'s history. So what's interesting here, though, and when you look at all this stuff, first of all, in Pisces is one of those signs that has, it's a dualistic sign. It's the two fish tied together at the tail, swimming in an opposite direction. And Pisces also represents idealism. So basically, half the people feel the country should go one way in relation to the virus, and the other half the people feel it should go the other way. So there's a division within the homeland here. And what's interesting about this, Mars not only is ruling the first house, the ascendant, and how the nation feels in general, but it's also ruling the 12th house. And the Scorpio is on the 12th house cusp too. What is the 12th house? The 12th house is our institutions, in particular hospitals and prisons, which is where the disease is festering. And what's another institution? Old age homes. So Mars ruling the 12th, that's where a lot of the disease is festering, in the institutions of the U.S. So that's very interesting there. And what's also interesting is Mars also rules the 5th house. Aries on the 5th house cusp. What is the two industries most affected by the virus? They're both fifth house industries, entertainment and sports, all considered non-essential businesses, but yet so many people's jobs are tied in to entertainment and sports. So the disease, Mars, Neptune, Mars ruling the fifth, has really affected the entertainment and sports industry and is festering in institutions. So very interesting stuff going on there. Now, going back here to the first house again, notice the Mars-Neptune trine, or is trining the ascendant. So, to me, that means we know there's going to have to be some help here involved. And that's where we start to see the second house come in, okay? The second house, which has Sagittarius on the cusp, has the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction. Now remember, this is one of the main conjunctions and aspects of this year. And you can see they're both retrograde. So this is going to be the second hit. And it's almost exact. Look at how close they are. They're within a degree of one another. So this is a very potent energy. Now, Jupiter, so the second house is the assets and material resources of the nation. Okay? So Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter, is on the second house cusp. So what is the condition of Jupiter? Jupiter is actually very weak right now. It's in Capricorn, which is fall, which is its fall. So basically the assets and the resources of the nation are in very weak condition. Material resources are a major issue right now. There's not enough workers producing stuff because of the virus, and the economy is hurt, so there's not a lot of consumerism going on. So the assets and resources of the nation are actually under threat in this quarter because of the condition of Jupiter. Now, what's interesting is Jupiter is also, like I said, conjunct Pluto. And Pluto is the plutocracy of the nation. That is, those who are in power. And in our nation, those are many of the people who are tied into big business and banking and the government. And so therefore, what I think is going to happen here with this Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, sextiling both the ascendant and the Mars-Neptune, is that the banks and the big business people are once again going to realize that the only way to save the people and the nation from falling into an economic tailspin that they cannot get out of is to do more stimulus. So that's what I think is going to happen with this Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, sextiling both the ascendant and the Mars-Neptune. Because of the disease shutting down the homeland, the ability of people to generate the normal economy, the people in power are going to distribute more resources so that these material resources and assets of the country can at least keep going on a minimal level. So you know, it's very, once again, a very there's weaknesses to the system that have been exposed by Pluto, and Jupiter, the normal way of doing it is not working with it in fall. What's also interesting to note is the South Node is in the second house too. And that means that basically this is our karma together. That the way the United States has been doing resources, the old way of doing it has now reached its end, and it's hurting. So we need to use Pluto now to transform the way that we do resources. And we need to look at alternative ways of doing that because of the weak condition of Jupiter. So very interesting how these four houses, or these three houses, are very, very tied in to what's going on in the country right now. Now we can go to the third house. Aquarius is on the cusp, and that means it's ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is actually right there, exactly conjunct the third house cusp, but retrograde and at the very end or beginning of Aquarius, but retrograding back into Capricorn. So the third house, this is very, very telling too. The third house is all about local movement, your local environment, communications, local business, like, you know, the businesses in your area. It's also about the press and information that the press is giving. It's also about like mail delivery, things like that, and also about the government making basically proclamations to the public. So that's all stuff that's ruled by the third house in a mundane chart of a nation. So what does it mean when Aquarius and Saturn, therefore, is the ruler of that house? It means there's restrictions. Saturn is all about restriction. And once again, we can see how this is so fitting to what's going on in the U.S. right now. Restricted movement locally because of the virus. Restricted businesses locally because they're not allowed to open because of the virus. The press feeling like the information they're getting from the government is being restricted and that they're not getting all the true story. The mail system being restricted. You know, the official announcements coming from the government seeming like almost like backwards, this retrograde Saturn in here. So, and it also, you know, it's interesting too, it also rules the third house, your local neighbors. So in a nation, that's your local countries that border you. So Mexico and Canada are ruled by this too, and we have restricted borders because of this right now. Now, what's interesting about this is the one aspect that Saturn is making is a trine to Venus retrograde in the seventh house. And the seventh house is actually the house of allies and open enemies. So here we have a positive aspect going from our Saturn to Venus, but they're both retrograde. So it's almost making me feel like the US and Canada and Mexico are going to try to come up with some way of dealing with the virus together as neighbors, but there's a lot of distrust. So the relationship is really backwards right now because of the two retrogrades, and so there's a lot of distrust. But like the ability to do that is actually there with that trine. So that's something we may see as some cooperation between Mexico, the United States, and Canada in relation to the virus. And then, you know, we go to the fourth house, which we've actually talked about already, but ruled by Pisces, which once again goes back to Jupiter ruling that house. And, you know, the fourth house is all about the land and the people and the heritage. So people feeling really lost, Pisces, about the condition of our country, about their nationalistic pride of our country even, you know. And this is also, you know, obviously a lot of our ideals as a country are being put in question right now by the Black Lives Movement and by like just the societal equities that people are aware of. So there's a lot of delusion from the actual people about how they feel about the U.S. as a nation now, which is really, sad that we've gotten to this point. It's interesting, too, that Ceres is down here, too, which is the goddess of grain, agriculture. So, showing that there is going to be issues with that, too. And, not having a workforce to work in the fields because of the virus and because of the strong immigration policies, the current administration may cause some serious food shortages during this time. Okay, going to the 5th house, which I touched on briefly before. So it rules entertainment and sports mainly, and also children. And it's very interesting that, once again, the ruler of the chart, Mars, is also ruling this house, which shows that this is one of the houses that is in really stress condition because of what's going on. And that, like I said, is, the entertainment and sports industry and all the things that people do with their kids. All these children's activities are shut down because of the virus. So notice, it's amazing astrology. Notice the 2 bodies that are in the 5th house. Chiron, the wounded one. So this is like creating deep wounds in the psyche of our children right now. Wounds that are gonna come out in very odd ways in the future. It's very sad. We are wounding our children right now by what's going on right here. But of course, all your entertainment and sports people are feeling very wounded right now too. And the other body that's in here, Eris, the goddess of chaos, landed in the 5th house. And she's ruled by Mars too. So, basically very chaotic situations going on in the entertainment and sports industries. And will continue to be that way. Moving to the 6th house, which is a pretty important house to look at in relation to what's going on with the protests and the Black Lives Matter movement, and just the, a lot of protests like the one in Seattle where people are just so tired of the way that the government has been handling so many situations, or mishandling so many situations, that, that things have really boiled over. So Taurus is on the cusp, which means our Venus retrograde is ruling this house. Now, what is the 6th house? The 6th house is all your civilian workers. This is the police, this is the military, this is the National Guard, this is the social workers, this is the hospital workers. So, Venus retrograde in Gemini, people not trusting them anymore, don't know what to think. And Gemini, a dualistic sign, so once again you have that split in the country where half, or a large chunk of the people want to support military and police action, and a large chunk of the people want to change the way that's done. So there is a lot of distrust in this relationship right now between law enforcement and the people. And incredibly so, here we go with astrology again. Uranus, the planet of revolution, chaos, impulsive actions in the 6th house. There will be individual upsetting events against the police and the military by civilians who are upset with them in this quarter. And they could react actually in very chaotic ways that could create, hysterical public events, basically. So this is also a very shaky area and to me really indicating a lot. And it's interesting to look, Uranus trines the MC, so the whole world is watching this. And I don't know if you're aware of it, a lot of the rest of the world has really been condemning the acts of the U.S. police force against their own citizens. So that's there. The seventh house, also ruled by Taurus. We touched on it a little bit before. So Venus is the ruler of the seventh house, and it's in the seventh house in weak condition. It is not only retrograde, but it's also squaring the MC. So once again, our allies just are not looking at us in a favorable way at all. And our enemies are able to take advantage of a situation where our attention is divided onto something else domestically. So this, once again, and it does trine that Saturn down here. So like I said, there may be some good movement with Mexico and Canada here, but this is just really, the U.S. has lost a lot of its influence in the world with its allies and with its enemies. We go to the 8th house, and it's loaded, as you can see. Loaded with the two lights, the sun and the moon, and the north node, which is basically, was that new moon eclipse. So it fell into the 8th house. And the 8th house in mundane astrology is just, it's basically the banking, in finances, corporations, international finance, things like that. So, and then, it also actually rules like mass death and reformation of society, things like that. So what do we've got ruling the 8th house? We've got Gemini in the ascendant, so Mercury retrograde is ruling the 8th house. So this really shows that the whole banking system, the whole international finance system, the stock markets, all that is on very, very shaky ground. Mercury's only strong aspect is a square back to that Chiron in the 5th house. So that's where a lot of the shared resources of the U.S. comes from, is from the entertainment and sports industry. And you can see that's where some of the pain of this Mercury retrograde is coming from. So once again, the markets, the banking industry, all that stuff is in serious stress. And I think, the other thing we have to be clear about is, because it does rule death, is that the death rate for the virus, because of a lot of miscommunication, disinformation, bad communications by leadership, will lead to more deaths and more that should have occurred. Now, what's interesting too is the two lights in the north node being in here. And basically, the sun represents the president, or the leader of the country, and the moon represents the people. So they're basically two sides of the same coin, because the leader reflects the people and vice versa. So, and then you have the north node, which is our dharma together, right between the two of them. So basically what this shows is Trump, our president, and the people of the United States have a common destiny together. And unfortunately, that common destiny is this coronavirus, the mishandling of it, the deaths that are going to occur, and the complete upheaval of the financial system throughout the world because of that. And, there's not really, much more to say. We know that this is already happening. So, that's a very, very intense stuff in there going on too. Now we go to the 9th house, Leo on the cusp, which is the sun ruling it. And basically the 9th house is It has to do with, like, basically the religion, law, the values, the philosophies of the nation. And I think right now, it's interesting that the house is empty, because I think a lot of that, because the sun is ruling it, which means the president has a lot of influence over that. You can see a lot of the decision making in this crisis has hurt, the things that the ninth house rules, and he's trying to influence that stuff. So it's like the courts and the judges are the ninth house. Universities, higher education is the ninth house. The law, medicine. So all these, he's ruled by the sun, which is the president. All the poor decision making that he's made has seriously affected all those things. The universities have been shut down, the virus, hospitals are in distress because of poor decision making early in the virus, courts are in distress. So that really shows the crisis that was created by the executive branch is hurting the judicial branch, hurting higher education. The 10th house is actually our executive leadership. That's the ruler of the country. So Virgo means, once again, Mercury is the ruler and Mercury is retrograde. Basically, a Mercury retrograde ruling the president means you can't trust a word the guy says. And I hate to say things like that, but it really means that anything coming out of this person's mouth cannot be trusted. It's disinformation, it's misinformation. I mean, we're, square the Chiron. So basically, we have a wounded president using his voice, Mercury, and creating more wounds because of his own pain. He's projecting his pain onto all of us. So, basically, anytime he gives a message, it hurts us instead of helping us, which is one of the things that he's been under a lot of criticism about, that his messages are not helping situations, they're actually dividing. And once again, yes, dividing, because Mercury is one of those dualistic planets, so it's, about two different sides. So very, very, very telling energy going on in the 10th house. The 11th house is Congress. And Congress is Libra, is on the cusp, which means Venus retrograde is ruling Congress. And basically that's very fitting, because you have one, the House, that's Democrats, and you have the Senate, that's Republicans. And so two different opposing views. That's the Gemini energy, that's the Libra energy, that's the Venus in Gemini, that's the Mercury in Cancer, all showing that Congress, the Libra is nice. Like, it actually shows they're going to have the ability to actually sit down and actually try to talk to one another at least. But the retrograde of Venus shows the wounding is so deep, and the distrust between the two of them, and they look at things in a completely different way, that it's really hard to imagine that very much is going to get done here. Once again, Venus does trine Saturn, but that's retrograde too, so you would think, well, maybe they could get some stuff done, but they have to get through layers of distrust that they built up with one another first. And then lastly, we go right back, which we already talked about, Mars ruling the 12th house, which is our institutions, like the hospitals and prisons, and how they are in complete distress because of the virus. So this is not a very happy chart, obviously, and we're not in a very happy time. I'm sorry it has to be so real like this. There's not a lot of good things to look forward to this quarter. I would say, on a physical level, they probably will get us a second stimulus check to help everybody out. And we may get a little bit of an agreement with Mexico and Canada on how we can all help each other out. And Congress may be able to do some work, but for the most part, the country and its resources are in stress. The psychology of the country and nationalism is at a low point. The entertainment and sports industries will continue to be completely distressed. There will be a lot of chaos and disorder related to the police and law enforcement and the military. And like I said, international finance is also completely in distress, and the president is not really helping the situation. So this is our summer. And, you know, they used to call the summer of 1968 long, hot summer. And I think this one may end up being longer and hotter, both literally and figuratively. So we will see how this all plays out. And then when the autumnal equinox comes, we'll have another chart to look at for the next 3 months, which will actually include the election of the United States presidency in November. So that should be an interesting chart to look at too. All right, this is Matt Lawton. This is the Astrological Winds channel. I am available for all kinds of readings and lectures like this. If you have a group that would be interested in having me come do a lecture on any subject practically in astrology, please contact me at matthe823@gmail.com. All right, next week we will do the July monthly forecast when we do the weekly forecast. So let's look forward to that. And until next time, keep your hopes up, stay healthy, do what you're supposed to do with the virus. We're all in this together. And also, you know, as far as like, you know, understanding the condition of the economy and where businesses are at and their inability to really, you know, meet a lot of our normal demands. And we all just have to, you know, step in line and try to work together as a nation, come together and continue. All right, until next time, this is Matt Lawton signing off. Thank you. Peace.